Today's guest is a world record breaker, adventurer, and leadership coach who knows exactly what it takes to reach the top. In 2008, Alan Mallory and his family became the first family of 4 to summit Mount Everest, the tallest, most dangerous mountain on Earth. Since then, Alan has turned that life-changing climb into a mission, helping people and teams conquer the mountains in their own lives. Alan, thank you so much for coming on the show. Let's
My
just
pleasure.
get straight to the point. What made you want to climb Mount Everest with your family?
My father really got us into mountaineering. You know, I have an older brother and a younger sister, and when each of us were 19, he took us to climb one of the 7 summits. So in my case, it was McKinley or Denali in Alaska. And so the idea of Everest did start with my father. It was actually around the dinner table one evening where he kind of, brought it forward. Would anyone be interested in attempting something like this? And I don't remember any of us really answering at that point. But I kind of started thinking, well, this is, it's a pretty unique goal. Our lifestyle is already pretty well aligned with what it would take to do something like that. And the more I looked into it, it just, it eventually develops into a personal goal or personal dream. And it really has to, because if you're not doing it for yourself, let's say, as a journey of self-discovery, you talk yourself into turning back long before you get anywhere near the end of that 2-month expedition, as the majority of climbers do. The success when we were there was about 29%, so over 70% turned back.
Wow.
So,
And then you made it to the top on that first climb?
yeah. We were about 2 years in the planning. There were a lot of logistics, and we were self-guided team, which is pretty, let's say, rare, I guess. Like most people would join a guided team, but and you're kind of transferring the planning, risk management, everything over to the guide in that sense. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do. It's just we had a fair bit of mountaineering experience, and we wanted to be in control of when we climbed and when we didn't. At least then, like, if it's a fatality, it's on us, right?
Yeah.
It's not on the guide saying, "Oh, it's sunny, we need to be climbing," and your body's saying, "Well, no, you don't."
Yeah.
And so anyway, it was hard to even find an outfitter that would support that type of team structure. But eventually, we did, and through planning and the negotiation, we were kind of our own self-guided team within a larger outfitting umbrella, you might say.
So how does the preparation work with planning something like this from beginning to end?
Well, if you're gonna prepare anything, prepare mentally, because the 70% that turn back, it's not because they're not physically fit. It really is quite a mental challenge, and certainly resilience would be the word that came to mind when I think of those teams that were successful. All kinds of stuff thrown at you every day, things you haven't experienced before. Are you able to dig back into other adventures you've been through in life, extrapolate from the ways you solve those problems to get yourself out of that? And it wasn't always, environmental challenges, or, it's a pretty crazy technical climb in sections, but some of the biggest challenges, I would say, were the physiological and biological challenges. The altitude weakens your immune system. You get these horrible sicknesses. It squashes your appetite. Basically, your body pulls blood away from areas that aren't vital to survival, and your immune system and the digestive system are that. And so you just, even the most delicious food is revolting. You're having to kind of force it down. So a lot of those challenges were pretty I guess you'd use the word horrible. There are enjoyable sections of the climb, but a lot of it really is, can you push your body and mind to that limit and be successful?
What do you think made your dad want to ask you guys to do such a crazy thing like this?
Well, he's always been big on family adventures, and I've tried to, I have 3 young kids of my own now, and I've tried to do the same thing with them. I just think that's, tremendously important and for kids, but also kind of what's missing nowadays with a lot of families. There's just tons and tons of broken families. People are so busy working to survive, they don't have time to do stuff with their kids, or they don't carve out the time. And so, I don't know exactly why he wanted to. I mean, he enjoys those types of activities anyway, and so that was a way of finding something that he could hopefully get his kids involved in that he would also enjoy.
Were you worried at all when you shared, like, you know what, let's climb Mount Everest with your family? Like, were you worried of their well-being?
Well, I didn't have kids at the time.
Oh.
Yeah, I was actually with my wife, but we weren't even married yet. So,
Okay.
yeah, I'd look at risk a little bit different now because obviously there's some, pretty, 3 people died while we were at Camp 4.
Oh, really?
On Everest, right? So,
Yeah. So who did you go to Mount Everest with, and did you know that you were gonna break a record beforehand?
No, this was my father. Well, actually, my whole family was there at the time. This is my father, brother, sister, and I, and my mother was there as well.
Okay.
But she had a fall just above base camp on another mountain called Island Peak, and she tore her Achilles tendon and part of her calf.
Yeah.
So she had to abandon her climb. But yeah, so the other 4.
What is it like seeing like your mother go through something like that, and then knowing that like you got to leave her and keep going?
Yeah, I mean, we did. It's not like we just discarded her on the side of the trail, but I mean, we kind of were in this together, but also with the the success ratio is very low. Like we were kind of like, even if I was, let's say, got injured or whatever, I wouldn't expect my other family members to turn back and give up. Like it's also a personal dream for everyone. So it's kind of like make sure they're safe and they're, can get off, get the medical help, but then continue on. Now I would say my mother, she was never as keen as the rest of us anyway.
Yeah.
But she's kind of the glue that holds the family together to some degree. And so we lost that aspect, but she's also more, I don't know if I should use the word sane, but she's like, she could have talked us out of some of the stuff maybe that we did in those final days, because you're climbing for over 30 hours straight and some of the sections are near vertical, and it was a blizzard for most of the night. Like it's pretty taxing final days.
What was like one of the worst experiences during your climb that you experienced yourself?
Yeah, I ran out of oxygen on the summit ridge on the way down which is that Hillary step section, which is really quite a technically treacherous area. A lot of exposed rocks you're having to scramble on, and so I'd already been climbing for I don't know how many hours at that point, not quite 30, but right through the night, so I realized this is what happened. I ripped off my mask, collapsed on the ice, just gasping for breath. I tried to go actually get back up and go a little further, but I collapsed on the ice. And so we did have 2 Sherpas with us who were kind of our connection back to that outfitter. And so one of them, Sungay, was with me at that point, and I turned to him and I said, I can't go on. I need oxygen. And luckily he decided, I'm very thankful, he decided to give me his oxygen cylinder. He lives in the air, at least spends more time there. Usually the Sherpas arrive at base camp before, and so he'd be a little better off than I would be, although still very difficult. So he did that, and I lay there on the ice. I asked him to turn my regulator right up to 3 liters per minute, which is very high. The maximum is actually 4. But he did that, and then I put my mask back on, started to go down, and the symptoms just continued getting worse. My limbs were shaking so violently that I couldn't even hold onto the rope, and that's when I really started to panic. I thought, I'm going to die up here.
Yeah.
And like the 200 other climbers before me who would have entered into that same situation. So it wasn't like that was a crazy thought that I had a good chance of perishing. And so I didn't make it very far at all. I came to where my father was, and he'd now run out of oxygen as well. He was leaning up against this wall of ice, and I said, I think I have HACE, which is this cerebral edema, where basically your small blood vessels constrict and rupture and leaks into your brain, and because it was kind of the onset of that, you might say. But I said he had actually a steroid pill, which you can take to help out a little bit with that. And I said, before I take that, go into my pack and turn my regulator right up to the maximum.
Yeah.
And as he was in there, he discovered that there was a problem with my regulator, which was preventing the oxygen from coming out at all.
So you weren't even getting any air the whole time.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Because it's a very small amount. If you wanted the oxygen we have here,
Yeah.
you'd need like 50 cylinders, and we can only take 3.
Yeah.
And so really what it's doing is it's tricking your body into feeling as though you're about 2,000 feet lower than where you actually are. So when you're at 29,000 feet at the summit, it feels like you're breathing air at about 27,000 feet.
Yeah.
So then once he cranked that on, like instantaneously, kind of, or within
No,
5,
no,
10?
but I could, I would say the symptoms slowly began to
Yeah.
subside a little bit.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's not like you can feel it blowing at you, right? Because it's this small little leak in your mass, but your cardiovascular system knows, right? It's so.
So like, what does that physically feel like?
What do you mean?
Like just like knowing that you're probably about to die soon.
Yeah.
And like what's going on in your mind?
Well, I remember my mind kind of racing, and there's the panic, and I'm telling myself, don't panic. It takes energy to panic, and here I don't have the energy to begin with. So, but yeah, I can't remember exactly, but you kind of, a lot of things go through your mind. It's pretty, it's I don't know, scary, I guess you could say. I was pretty scared at that point.
And how did you train for mentally tough situations like that prior? Like,
well, I can't speak for my siblings or my father, but like I've studied the human mind for a lot of my life, and I got so interested in that when I was in high school in grade 10, I developed a very severe social phobia and anxiety disorder, and so that which is called generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD. And that plagued me for a lot of years. I went through, a number of years of depression, just hating that part of me and living in my own mind. And that's really what caused me to pursue the psychological route, and eventually get my master's in psychology, which is kind of rare for an engineer because they're polar opposites. But I started to see how those psychological strategies were pretty beneficial in my life, and so that's what caused me to continue along that path. Did I get off the question? What was the question?
No. Which psychological strategies do you refer to?
Well, like at times, and I've used this in other areas of my life. I call this like choosing your own summit. So I will. Because when I've written my books and so on, like there's things that like it just seems unobtainable, and so I'll and I used this actually on the mountain at one point when I was going from Camp 1 to Camp 2. It was a blizzard. I could only see a little bit ahead of me, and we'd come all the way from base camp, so I'd hit the wall. I had nothing, and so I'd forget about the summit and just choose my own summit. It would be a chunk of rock or whatever, about the limit of what I could see, and just only allowed my mind to think about that, and just continued forcing myself to put one foot in front of the next until I reached that point. Then I'd allow myself to rest for 2 to 10 minutes on the ice, and then did it over and over again. Mm-hmm. So that's like I would call that as a self-motivation type strategy. Yeah. I had a lot that really in the mental health space as well to and I wouldn't say I invented any of these. Like I researched a lot of them, and some of them I adapted for my own that seemed to work for me. But changing some of the things from my past that would when it still affects you emotionally, because when you think of it, you have negative emotions. Yeah, and so a good strategy that was to go back and kind of change the ending of different memories and play the right movies through your mind rather than the disaster movies that most of us are playing if we're not consciously taking an approach like that. And I found some of those really, really helpful over time. I would notice that, wait a second, now when I think of those situations, that's just one of them. Another one was you kind of picture your own adult self kind of speaking with your younger self, and it changes the way you emotionally process those certain situations. And so I thought, well, these are a bit silly. They're mind games, but then I realized I'm not having the same negative emotion when I think of these things. And not only that, when I'm faced with situations in the here and now, I have less negative emotion. Yeah. So I doubled down on them, and I really, spent a lot of kind of years in the psychological side.
How are you able to pivot from being a mechanical engineer into now moving into this whole different space?
Sure. Yeah. And, well, I mean, in a way, my mental health journey pushed me there, because there was the self-education piece, but also there was a what I would call voluntary exposure therapy, things that I used to avoid like the plague, like any kind of social presentation, for example. I said, no, I've got to just do this. And so I started doing it. I would and this is even before the climb, I was starting to work on things like that. And and I started, after years of that, I just started to enjoy it. I think when you've overcome something like that, and you're able to do it successfully, and and people like it. They come up to you and they tell you you're making a difference in their own life. Like there's something. It feels good to do that, and so that was. And so eventually I thought, well, this is a bit of a leap, but I think I'm just going to leave my engineering career. And most of my friends and relatives, they were like, are you crazy? You're going to leave a pensioned engineering position to do what?
Yeah.
But I've made a lot of decisions in life with the mentality of, I don't want to look back and say, what if?
Yeah.
If this all crumbles and fails, I'm still an engineer. I'll find another firm, hire back on, but at least that's not a stone unturned, right? So,
yeah, no, it's
yeah, and then I've just really I found it so personally rewarding, and it takes me all over the world really, to different conferences and meeting new people, and I've integrated it well with my lifestyle. Often when I'm in an interesting area, I go skiing, I go hiking, I do some adventure.
What would you say right now is your personal summit that you're aiming for?
I have a lot on the bucket list. Yeah, I'm actually working on it. In 2 weeks, I have a marathon. Yeah. So I've got, I wouldn't say that's maybe the same league as Everest, but I found just how important it is to make sure you have some summit you're working towards. Mm-hmm. Because I've had times in life where everything just seems to be working out, and yet there's almost this complacency or something missing. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of been like, well, why? I finally don't have any troubles and hear what's missing. And the antidote, as far as I've been able to tell, is find another area to push yourself out of your comfort zone. And when they interview people that achieve longevity in life, they almost all say the same thing. I push myself mentally and physically to the end of my days. And that seems to actually bring meaning back to my life. And that doesn't have to be in athletics. That can be in, when I was writing my books, like that was really like, that was a summit I was working towards, right? Yeah. But that's psychologically pretty important. And so I do have a few things like that, like expanding my speaking business, and Europe actually is what I'm kind of working on. And and then I have 3 young kids, and so I've got lots of challenges I do with them, and it's maybe not as daunting as Everest, but I've just got a lot of smaller summits on the the radar.
It does seem that you keep yourself super busy to always like kind of have something to overcome. Yeah. As you say, you're trying to expand your speaking business. Where has it taken you so far?
Well, almost every state. I think only maybe South Dakota and maybe one other. And so that's been really interesting. I mean, there's just so many interesting adventures. Yeah. From all over the place. I actually I go to Hawaii fairly often to do programs there, and I just love the adventures you can get up to. And then I did one in New Zealand years ago. I did one in Australia. Not a lot of overseas, but and I'm kind of have mixed feelings about whether that is something I should pursue. I already spent a lot of time on airplanes. If you start doing these, flights across the ocean, it's that much more time away from my family. Yeah. Although having said that, a lot of the time I try to bring one or more members, or we go as a family.
Cool. Yeah. Do you think that being a mechanical engineer and just like operating with like machinery systems and technology, like do you relate that to the brain at all? And is that what made you hack like yourself in a way? Yeah,
well, for sure. I mean, I use a lot of that, what do you call it, first principles type thinking, the way a problem solved. Now, was that almost innate to my personality? Is that why I went into engineering to begin with? Or is that something I learned in engineering? That's, kind of another a deeper discussion about how, but yeah, so I use that all the time. So I'm probably, if I look back, I say, well, maybe would I wish I went just straight into psychology? That I've just found that so interesting, but I probably wouldn't be the same well-rounded or fairly well-rounded person if I didn't have both sides.
Yeah, because my brother's an engineer, and I know a lot of engineers, and like for an engineer to transition to like public speaking and then writing books, like for me, it looks like wow, like that's a crazy transition. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
like to be
so-
like well adapted in both is like it's such a unique thing, I think.
Yeah, no, it is pretty unique, and it's actually not been particularly good for my speaking career that I'm an engineer, because I've had clients come up afterwards and say, "Man, we were so worried hiring an engineer. You should advertise as the engineer that can speak."
Yeah, literally.
Because it's kind of a rare trait.
Yeah. Do you think the little kid version of yourself would be proud of the man you are today?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's not like I have everything right. There's still lots of things that, I'm trying to better myself, and that's almost a lifelong journey. But yeah, I mean, I think I try to take the right path when presented with, it's presented to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think you're gonna go try to summit again?
I don't want to go anywhere near there. It's it's not something, it's difficult to enjoy. There's just so many layers of different challenges, especially the kind of the biological challenges, physiological challenges with the sicknesses and all that. Now, having said that, my kids, so one or more of them might want to approach it. I'm certainly not encouraging it, but I'm also aware, like, you can't dictate your kid's direction, and it's almost it's a family tradition now. Their grandfather has, their aunt, their uncle, their father.
They almost have to now, right?
So yeah, we may have to cross that bridge at some point. That's maybe what
I know. Everybody always asks you about like Everest as like this big adventure journey or experience you had. Do you have any other ones that you haven't got to tell us much about?
Oh, any other adventures? Well, Denali or McKinley. I mean, it has lots of lessons through there. But other ones. Well, it's hard to say what people find interesting in my workshops. Often bring in a lot of the whitewater canoeing. We've done a lot of winter camping and ski. Like, we just do a lot of outdoor adventures. Adventure racing. You've done up to where it's almost like a triathlon, but out in the wilderness, where you're mountain biking or orienteering, running through the bush with a compass. And those are up to the longest I did was 36 hours in length. Like, it's racing right through the night.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
How was that? Like were you not worried running at nighttime and like anything kind of happening to you guys at that moment?
Well, actually, we ended up, because the main sports, let's say, that are part of most of these adventure races are the running, as I said, through the bush, the mountain biking, and canoeing. And we ended up in that particular one in the middle of the night on a whitewater river. And so I was, and because we hadn't slept, I was hallucinating. I would see things kind of like it would be a rock, and I was like, I remember saying to my brother, like, "Oh, there's a beaver there," and it was just like me, things kind of blurring in my eyes. Like, it's weird when you don't have the sleep. But at times, so we had these little like lights, but they didn't really shine very far ahead, and so I was listening for the gurgle of the water to know where there's a rock for us to avoid. Yeah. But at times I wouldn't hear it. At times I'd be like, I'm pretty sure that's a rock. Bang! I mean, you kind of go right into it. Yeah. So anyway, that's what adventure racing is all about. It's like, can you survive stuff like that?
Out of all, like, I guess out of your experiences, like, what are like a couple lessons that you can share with our audience in regards to like perseverance and resilience?
Well, that psychological thing I was talking about, like, make sure you have your own Everest. Like, that ends up being pretty important. Find a way, and it can be in philanthropy or sports or whatever, but push yourself outside of your comfort zone, especially if you're feeling that, I don't know what I'd call it, something missing. Yeah. So that's definitely a lesson. I mean, from the resilience part, see, resilience is kind of an interesting one. And I tried to, in writing my second book, there's a chapter on the Summit of Self-Resilience. And I tried to like dig into how much of it is are you born with? Because there is an element of that. Like, some people are just more resilient. It's a kind of like it's partially related to your personality. And then how much can you cultivate? Can you become a more resilient person? And I think it is a bit of both. Yeah. And so how do you become a more resilient person? Well, you start by being resilient in the small little things. When you make commitments to yourself to do something that might even seem trivial, do you follow through with it and take it seriously, or do you kind of take that New Year's resolution approach where within a few weeks it's kind of gone, and you're kind of training yourself in that sense that you're the type of person that doesn't take internal commitments seriously? And so And so I'm careful about that. Like when I'm pursuing something, I make sure it's meaningful to me, and it's not someone else's dream. A lot of people, that's what happens. It's kind of their parents' dream, and so I make sure it's something that really is interesting and meaningful to me, and then I try to follow through with it. And the more you do that, the more you kind of convince yourself there always is a way. If I put my mind to this, I can make it a reality. And so, maybe that's the biggest thing I took away from Everest as well. Like, this was a pretty daunting expedition. It was crazy. Even beforehand, people, would think, this family's going to take on Everest. Like, it's just, they won't make it to base camp. And, that was in some ways going through my mind as well. Like, can we do this? But so now that I've done that, in all the different Everests I've went through, if we even look at my mental health journey, those were stepping stones in building the resilience that's needed for the next thing. And those people that are really, bringing about major changes in the world, in life, and so on, everyone, the tendency is to look at them and say, wow, like, I could never get there. Like, how did they get there? They didn't start there. It's like when my keynotes, people often come up to me and say, "Oh, you're just such a natural, like, gifted speaker," and I say thank you very much, and I'm very polite. And in my mind, I'm thinking, if you knew me in my younger years, like, this is years and years of me working at becoming better. So,
no, it's awesome.
So it's like consciously those small little things.
Yeah.
Like attacking those small little things.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you force yourself to continuously think about those small little things? Yeah.
Well, I mean, you have a larger goal and you're kind of breaking it down into these small little iterations, and you can't be so rigid in your mindset that you're not able to adapt as life changes. But yeah, so that's what I tried. It's kind of like that, what I was talking about, this choosing your own summit, right? It can seem daunting and you can just never get started. Like later becomes never for so many people.
But it seems like it's like a pattern though. It's like you have to like make your bed. And you and that should be like a non-negotiable, and just like little conscious efforts like that. Like I remember my uncle told me one time, like, I threw a garbage into the garbage can and like I missed it, and I thought no one saw me when I was young, so I'm kind of and he goes, how you do one thing is like how you do everything, right? So it's like those little things. You think that's necessary? Like those little like small tasks in order to build like your psychology.
Well, is that, I wonder if it was like, that's almost a moral lesson versus, I'm trying to think of that one, whether it would, because there's lots of things, like I'm not like a super neat freak at the house or whatever. I don't always make the bed. I have heard that saying, well, you start, I think if it's aligned with the direction I want to go, then I take it really seriously. If not, because like there's just too many. You have to kind of pick a direction,
there's too many things out there that
you can't
like
be
hacks and stuff.
You can't be the best at everything.
Pick the battles you actually.
So how do you find, I guess, what's meaningful then? Because you're saying like you have to have an aim and then put those little pieces towards that aim. But like how do you do that?
Well, I know that is something I've also struggled with, and it's almost trial and error. It's kind of like, because there's nothing is objectively meaning in life. It's a subjective thing, right? And so you have to. You kind of try, and this is the problem. Like I think in the schooling system, like kids have to make decisions on where they're going to go before they actually get to try anything out, and so then people pick the wrong careers and say, well, this just isn't for me. Like the more things you can try out, the more you just kind of see, well, that really resonated with me, so yeah, I mean that's about the best you can do, I guess. It's a subjective feeling. I look at the things that I feel, okay, this is actually really making a difference, an impact, something like that.
And when you're reaching a goal, are you very meticulous with like setting up like a pre-plan for everything before you start initiating it?
I'd say in general, yes. Yeah, no, I am a planner, and maybe that's because I have the engineering and project management background. I want to make sure that it's feasible, because you can set lofty goals that are too lofty, right? And so that's where make sure but it needs to be a stretch.
Yeah.
Right. And then you break it down into say, okay, what's a small enough part of that first step that I'll actually do?
Yeah.
Right. Because if it's too big, you never get around to doing it. And so, but writing my books, I would say, is an example of that. It wasn't something I was naturally motivated to do. And a lot of years, like on my first one, people would come up to me after, I told our story, and they'd say, you've just got to write a book. You've got to write. I wasn't even planning on writing a book.
Yeah.
But then I thought, well, maybe this would be a pretty good stretch goal for me. Where do I start? And so for a while there, I was kind of stuck at the where do I start, and then I just decided. Luckily, I've kept a journal on Everest, and so I thought, okay, I'm just going to start. I'm going to do 100 words, and then that's what I did, and for both of them, even my second book was almost more difficult because it was like a really deep dive. It's a psychological book, Summits of Self, and so I would have to come up with these I wasn't just there was always something else pulling me away from getting that done, and so I've developed these I call them self-motivation strategies. I would kind of make pacts with myself. Okay, you can have breakfast when you when you finish 200 words or whatever, and then I would just make that commitment, and I'm like, the hungrier I get, the more I'm like, get this done.
Yeah.
And then I'd get it done, and then I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So
literally negotiating with yourself.
Yeah. Which is kind of weird but anyway, I've figured out ways because that's an example of something that I know will be good for me, but I'd rather do something else. That's delayed gratification.
Yeah.
And so you have to have some methods of motivating yourself to do the things that you think would be good for you in the long run.
You think about it, a human's such a weird machine. It can go either direction. It's not like it's preset to go.
And you think it'd be just instinct, but it's almost rationalizing with two different people.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
The person you are now and the person you can become.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Well, because you always almost have that that's the hedonic side of okay, what's the most pleasurable thing I could do in this second? And usually it's well, it's lots of things.
There's a lot of
food or well, anyway, things like that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's awesome, man. Honestly, is there anything else I guess you want to promote or share with our audience?
Oh, well, I guess not really. I mean, anyone who's kind of into personal development, I send out a free monthly video series. You might be interested in that on my website, alanmallory.com. You can sign up for that, and hopefully our paths cross at an event at some point. But if not, keep climbing your own summits.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Awesome. Cheers to that. And thank you so much for taking the time to come sit with us. And
that was awesome.
The audience, again, you guys got spoiled with another one. And make sure you comment, like, and subscribe, and we'll add all your tags here.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Awesome.
Peace.
Thanks.